Hi, everybody, and welcome back or welcome to Safe Journeys. I am your host, Grace McCormick, and today I am lucky enough to get to speak with Ebone Bell, a motivational speaker and advocate. How are you doing today?
I am great. I am happy to be here talking to you, and I really appreciate you having me.
Yes, I'm super excited to talk to you. I got the opportunity to listen to you speak at the ICASA, which is the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Violence. I have the water bottle right here, but
Yes.
I got to listen to you. You were the keynote speaker for, I believe, the first day of the conference, which was a great way to kick it off. And I know there's a few things you talked about, one of which, as a facilitator, a large part of your job is managing and maintaining conversations similar to this, but maybe in a larger setting. That are often difficult or awkward. How do you navigate the uncomfortable conversations?
Yeah, I think it's a few things here. So, at least my approach, anytime I speak with groups, or it could be small groups or one-on-one conversations with people, because I know, when we talk about diversity, inclusion, allyship, I think for some folks, they take a step back, right? I think we're also in a time that things like DEI is like a dirty word, or like, why are we doing this? And so my approach is always just to get on the level with everyone. Like, I want, whether I'm on stage or sitting with a small group and facilitating, I always just want to get on the same page with people and make things relatable, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. That's what it's about. And so I always just say, hey, we're all friends and family here, and we're all starting in different places. And I want to make sure that people really understand it's okay to be where you are. It's okay to have difference of opinions. It's okay to not understand what allyship or why belonging and diversity is important and can make you be successful. And it's also great to have people in the audience that are like, I am doing this work, you know what I mean? And I am committed to this. We have to understand that people are in different places in their journey. And I think we can talk to each other no matter what and meet people where they are, for sure. And I think that is always a great place to start, is just to say, hey, I'm still learning. I'm a work in progress and I want to do better. And I believe that everybody should probably be in that space. Like, you just want to do better in life. And I think sometimes we need a reminder when we have those conversations. So that's always the take that I personally have anytime I'm having these conversations. I always start with, why am I here? Why is this important? And why I want you to be a part of this conversation. So I think that's at least where I am. I know everybody has a different approach, but I think relatability and getting back to basics is always a great place to start.
Yeah, and I think you and I are similar in our approach of conversational activism, right? We will talk with the intention of education in any context, formally
Yes.
or informally, right? I think one of the things I liked about your presentation at ICASA was how you involved the audience, even though we were quite literally on different levels. You're on a stage, we're sitting at our tables eating our breakfast and listening intently.
Right.
Um, but my question is, and I think this is something I struggle with, as patience is not necessarily a virtue I possess. Have you ever reached a point where you've recognized that there's no more room for education? How do you combat activism burnout when you're like, I just can't reach these people or, a person anymore?
Yeah. Um, I think activism burnout, education burnout is absolutely so real. And it's really easy to be in these spaces of, I could be talking to 500 people, and then I notice the five people in the room that are in their phones or falling asleep or whatever the case might be. And for me, I've really had to learn and understand that I'm not going to maybe reach everyone. And that's okay. I want to. And I always go in with, I want to talk to everybody in here, but I also am a realist. And I understand it's okay. You may not reach everyone. I always say you may not reach everyone, but you will reach someone. And that is what keeps me going. I've actually said it to people sometimes, like I'll have questions where people ask something similar. And I think they want me to say this nice, fluffy answer of, no, we can reach them. And I think we should always have that mentality that we do want to do that. But I believe you have to find that balance of what's going to fill you up, because I believe you cannot go out and fill other people's cup without you being filled up first. So you have to find what that balance looks like. Like you can advocate for others and educate others, but you got to advocate for yourself as well. And for me, I have found that balance of knowing that I can't reach everybody, because if I continue to think that way, I would have burnout right away, and you and I wouldn't be even talking. You wouldn't have even seen me at the conference. But for me, what a great reminder is are those people that do come up after, those people that ask those questions, that engage, because then I'm like, there are people out here that want to do better. The emails or messages that I get, or LinkedIn messages that I get afterwards, the people that are like, thank you, I didn't think about this, but I want to do this moving forward. Ah, that's what I love. That's where I get my cup filled, and it kind of prevents that burnout for me. It's because I know there are people out here that want to do this. I just spoke with a sorority in Nashville, Tennessee earlier this week. And it was predominantly white sorority, but to know that they are committed to this work, and the room was filled. It wasn't mandatory. I love when that happens. It fills my soul. And sometimes I even say it to them, like, I get burnout, and sometimes I can maybe lose a little bit of faith, because I wonder to myself, are people listening? Do they even care what I have to say? But it's those conversations after, it's that engagement during, that I'm like, this is why I do what I do. So if that means I've reached 5 people out of 100, I've done my job, and burnout will not be a thing. And I think everybody has to find what that balance looks like. And I think people just need to remember sometimes we can't reach everyone, and that's okay. We still need you in the game.
Yeah, I think making an impact is its own kind of reward.
Mm,
Like you could be having the worst day ever. And I think if you realize, I'm making a positive difference, then you're like, okay, maybe my day's a little bit better. I
yeah.
know, like as someone who works primarily with kids, when they hit that gotcha moment, oh, I could live off of that. When you're like, oh, you get it. That's awesome. You get it.
Yeah.
That's all I could ask for.
The kids are the best.
Oh,
I
they're the
always
best.
joke and say they're so open-minded and like sponges, and want to learn, and I always say that the adults, sometimes we have a little bit more work to do because we can be stuck in our ways. You're not going to tell me what to do, but alongside my partner who runs Simply Lead, I do an anti-bullying series. So they work with the staff and teachers. I work with the students, and it's amazing, like you said, to for them to have these aha moments to say, oh, I get it. So when they're sharing, they're communicating with each other. At the end, we're building out actionable items to do better in their schools, is just amazing to see. And that's where you get your cup filled. Like you said, you and other people in our industry are really making a huge impact, sometimes more than we know.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where it's not always quantifiable, but when it is, that almost
Mm,
makes it better. I recently part of our work is I'm the community educator. So while I
mm,
go to schools, I also work just kind of out and about in the community. People will see me at events and whatever. But one of the things we're doing is I've decided to call it Community of Care Initiative. So it's kind of a
mm,
multifaceted approach to creating relationships within our community. One of which I actually just got off the ground. It's a clothing voucher program. We're working with a local thrift store to get vouchers for people to fill like a Walmart bag of clothing for free they have like $5 fill-a-bag sales, and we've already had over 60 people sponsor it, and we just started, maybe 2 weeks ago. And it's one of those things
wow.
where it's so I could cry, but like it's one of those things where I'm going to go hand out the tickets because it's not just for our organization, it's for the whole community in need. And so it's one of those things where when I'm physically holding those vouchers in my hands, I'm like, oh, this is my life's work kind of quantified in little pieces of paper, which is crazy. And I think as someone who has privilege, speaking about myself, I've kind of recognized that allyship is a process of understanding your personal privileges, right? And you have to
Mm,
translate those into advantages for marginalized groups and communities. However, I've noticed, not everyone has the education and the privilege of the education I've had. And so it becomes difficult to recognize, and it kind of is a systemic creation of blind spots. So,
mm.
how do you recommend people introspect to check their privilege? And which I'm sure is a very hot button phrase, check your privilege. But I mean that literally in the base level of like doing a check in with yourself. How do you translate your privilege into allyship and activism? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. One of the things I know that you probably heard me say is people will listen, right, to allies more than they will the people you're speaking up for, especially when you look like them. Maybe you have the same privilege as them, because a lot of times it's those people that don't speak up. I always use the example, I'm a Black queer woman. So if I'm, continuing to talk about, hey, support Black women-owned businesses, they get less support, people are going to tune it out because it's just like, there she goes again, talking about the same thing, like, racism is dead, like all of this stuff, right? But coming from you or someone who doesn't look like me or even identify like me is different. And so when I go out, I really try to communicate that power to people. I think for some people, that's definitely an aha moment of kind of recognizing what that privilege looks like, and how we use it. And I think this is not necessarily a quick and easy answer, but I think I would really have people look and see that the power that they have, and realize that there are communities that their voices aren't as elevated as your voice might be elevated, and bare minimum speaking up, starting within your inner circle. I talked about that a lot. I think sometimes people are afraid to call things out and say, hey, why would you say that? Even though that takes nothing. And it's just a few words to say, hey, that's actually, not right. People would be surprised at those reactions, that, those responses that they may get from the person maybe they're calling out. But I understand everybody isn't able to do that, and that's okay. But sometimes just starting and practicing within your inner circle, the people that the people that look like you, is a great place to start, because everybody needs to be educated. All of us should be learning and growing. And that is a great place for people to start and use that privilege and the power of their voice. Another thing I often talk about is just unlearning and learning. I think that's also a great place to start. So, if you're not signing on and believing in, privilege, or, another great way to say it is people that have more of an advantage than maybe a more disadvantaged group. There's content, there's information out there. What does it mean? I always joke and say, there's free resources. Google is free. We have TED Talks. We have great articles out there, documentaries that are factual. I need to say that because we live in a world with a lot of truths and untruths, and sometimes coming from powerful people. We can do the work. See what people are talking about. You don't have to believe it right away. But I think it's important for you to understand what it is. And I think a lot of times people just get defensive right off the bat. Maybe somebody's like, well, I'm a white person who, didn't grow up with much, or, whatever the case might be. So I wasn't privileged. And I think immediately they get defensive, but that's not what the privilege we're talking about. We're talking about the hierarchy in society. We're talking about how people are treated, really based on the color of their skin, based on their gender. So it doesn't matter that maybe you grew up in a different socioeconomic situation. We're talking about something different, and it's important to do that work. Sometimes we just don't go a step further to say, is this really true? Or what does this really mean? We just believe what other people say. And I want to empower people to do your own work, your own intentional learning, because we can't just believe everything that we hear, and that can go for people that I support, people in power I support. That doesn't mean I believe everything that they say. We have to put that work in. And I think that's a great place to start when we talk about privilege, because I think there's a lot of education in that and a lot of aha moments, as we're saying, that can happen from that. So my point is, know the power you have in your voice and do the work. Just learn, read about it. What is it? So you have a better understanding, because you would be surprised the information that's out there. And you're like, oh, I had this wrong. And maybe I understand this a little bit more. And it's okay. I always tell people it's okay, you know, uh, that you're white, that you're a man. Nobody is faulting you for that. I think that that's another thing. We're all born however we're born. We all didn't get to pick and raise our hand, when we're in our mother's stomachs and say, this is what I want to be. You just are who you are. People are upset and just pointing out that people are treated differently based on who they are. They're not attacking you for who you are. They're attacking the system.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you had also mentioned in regards to intentionality, right? There's a difference between having good intentions and being intentional. And that was something that really resonated with me as someone who's always looking for ways to help to make the world a better place. How do you make sure that you're riding that line of standing up and advocating versus stepping on the toes of the community that you're
Mm,
trying to help? And I think that kind of comes into terms with allyship and privilege, right? Like you can recognize like, oh, this gives me, you know, power in my voice, which like you said is an ally's most important tool, but I think maybe one of the more important tools also is knowing when to use it and when to
hmm
step back and let people and kind of amplify other people's voices. So
Yeah.
what do you recommend in terms of kind of towing that line of stepping on versus stepping up?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really great point. And like you said, it's just as important as the other things we're talking about, like when to use your voice. When I say good intentions, essentially, I think we all have good intentions in all situations, because we want to be good people. We want to help people. And that is a great place to start. I think you should bare minimum start in that realm. We just need you to be in action, and intentionality, which is, defined as being deliberate. It's an action. Um, I think I always tell people, when you come in as an ally, you're coming in as a partner. So think of how partnerships look. Partnerships are essentially 50-50, right? Whether that can be a romantic partnership, a business partnership, a friendship partnership. There's nobody that is taking the lead more. It's 50-50. It's not, right, 80-20 or whatever the case might be. Allyship is basically the same. Uh, a lot of times we want to come in as a savior and save the day because it makes us feel good. Look at us. Look what we did. We spoke up for this person. And sometimes it does feel good. And I want that to feel good. I want it, so you are empowered to do it again. And you can feel good as a partner instead of a savior. So this is where intentionality comes in. So if you're in a situation to speak up, it's okay to take a step back and say, okay, am I going to be intentional with this? Am I stepping on any toes? So maybe there's a situation, problematic language, behavior is happening towards another person who might be in that room. And immediately you want to be like, hey, why would you say that? You know what I mean? But there are ways that you can be intentional about it. One of the ways is maybe you don't say it then and there, but maybe you go to the person, because I tell people checking in with people is absolutely a form of also speaking up. So maybe you didn't know what the quite right thing to say. So instead, you wait and you go to the person and say, hey, I heard this. I know that it bothered me, and I just want to check in with you. And moving forward, if I'm in that situation again, how can I support you? Do you mind if I say something? Because, as an ally, I want to be able to speak up. And that person, that partner, in this will tell you, yeah, thank you for noticing that. I just appreciate you seeing me and hearing me and understanding. And thank you for wanting to speak up. So now you know how to approach the situation moving forward. And sometimes you do speak up when that happens. Maybe you turn to the other person, you're like, let me see real quick if they're going to say something before I say something. Because sometimes that happens a lot where people speak over and take over a conversation. And so maybe you even bring that person in with you and say, hey, that's actually kind of problematic what you said. And so, please correct me if I'm wrong. Right. And it really brings that partnership in it together. Because I know sometimes you just want to speak up for the people you love. You want to speak up for things that you feel like are unjust. And I want that to happen. And sometimes we just have to be intentional and we have to remember to come in as a partner. It's basically saying, hey, what can I do to support you? Do you feel comfortable with me doing this? Because I want you to know I have your back and I want to do it in the best way possible instead of saying, oh, don't worry, I got this. Look at me. And I know that's not kind of hard to navigate sometimes, but one of the things I say is allyship takes practice. And that's okay. We are all learning. It takes practice. Even though I go out and talk about this, I'm practicing still, the best ways for me to show up.
And speaking of, speaking about that practice, if someone who, they've never even heard the term ally before, which is kind of hard to conceptualize, I think, in this world, but I've always accepted that there's going to be things I will never know. And my goal is to learn as much of those things as possible. So if someone has no idea where to start, but they want to be an ally, they have that drive. Where can they start learning about building those respectful relationships and kind of allyship as a concept? Where do you recommend?
Yeah, so a couple of things that you can do on an individual level. Again, there are great resources out there. There are great articles. Again, people talk about it on TED Talks, documentaries. There are great books on it as well. So I would say that is just a great place to start with what is allyship? How do I show up? I wrote a recent blog about here are different ways to show up there. And I'm saying that because on evergreenspeakers.com, they have some blogs. And so I realized as I'm going out and speaking with people are like, how do I? What does that look like? So I wanted to share that with people, but I'm not the only one writing about this. But those little, and I don't want to call them little, but those quick reads, those quick TED Talks, whatever that might look like, will give you a better picture of what allyship is. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but look up the definition. Just starting somewhere to understand just what is it before you can really jump into it, I think is really important. We can't scream love is love for the LGBTQ community and not really understand what LGBTQ means. You know what I mean? And I know people have good intentions, but we have to just start from the basics. It's also having conversations with people. That's another way that we learn. There are people like you, myself, all kinds of people that are doing this work. If you have folks in your companies that have ERGs, and those for the people that don't know that are like, different diverse groups that people have. So some companies might have a women's group, a group for people of color or Black folks or AAPI or people with different disabilities. I've seen it all. Those are also great places to start. They do events often, and what a great way to just walk in and learn a little bit more and how you can support the group, or just have conversations with people and say, hey, I know you head up the ERG, and maybe I feel silly asking this, but I believe everybody needs to have an ally. I mean, do you have time to like sit down and talk about what that looks like with me? A lot can happen in a conversation. Just open your mouth, right? I keep saying your voice is a very powerful tool. That's not just for speaking up, it's for having conversations and educating yourself as well. So free resources that are online, books, articles are great, and having conversations with people to understand, hey, what does that look like? And I'm not telling you to exhaust people who are educators, right? And always say, oh, well, there's a Black person that's at my job. Let me ask them about Black things, right? We have to be intentional about how that looks. And I always tell people, if you are just real with people, a lot of times they'll respect that when you say, hey, I don't expect you to tell me everything. And I don't want you to give me all your labor, but I would appreciate it if maybe you can give me a couple minutes that I can understand that and ask them for resources or how you can support that ERG or this community or whatever that might look like. Uh, but conversations and opening your mouth is really, really important. And it's okay not to know what it is or where to start. Again, just get in the game and start with the basics and then start having these conversations with people. And of course, if there are companies out there, there are great speakers and facilitators that can come out and talk to you about this work.
And I wonder how one could maybe get in contact with one of these awesome speakers, maybe. Do you know any? Do you have any recommendations?
I do know one. I think you just saw her at a conference. I love this. I I genuinely enjoy this work, and I genuinely enjoy speaking with companies. And I go to campuses across the country as well. And if people are looking to have more of these conversations, even workshops, they can find me on my website and Instagram. Everything is Ebony Bell, EBONEBELL. So ebonybell.com. You can find me on all social media under my name, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of that. But I specialize again in talking about allyship, belonging. I do a couple of special one-offs too, where I talk about LGBTQ history and the importance of LGBTQ allyship. I also do a Black History and Juneteenth presentation. So everything kind of in that realm, as well as talking about leveling up with leadership and talking about the leadership of we instead of the leadership of me. So anybody, of course, that is interested in those topics, please reach out, talk to me. I genuinely love having these conversations because I believe change and understanding happens in conversations.
So thank you very much for joining me today. I'm so excited that we got to talk further, and I feel like, again, I've learned a lot simply just by listening to you. I could listen to you give presentations, I think, all day, every day. Make sure to my audience that you're following both our podcast and our regular channels at safe.journeys and at safer.journeys.podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Until then, I'm your host, Grace McCormick with Ebony Bell, and I hope you have a safe journey wherever you're going today. Bye-bye.